Welcome to the Caregiving Podcast. I'm Inga.
And I'm Julie.
And long story short, we have Caregiving. We are two momtrepreneurs who have built an in-home care business from the ground up, guided every step of the way by God's care and fueled by agape love. Almost 14 years later, we felt called to create this podcast as a resource for families with caregiving needs. Whether you care for a family member or are looking for advice on professional caregiving, we want this to be a platform to support you.
Each week, we will come to you with encouraging stories of families who have found the right balance for their loved ones, tips for how to care for them and you, and much more. We hope you continue to join us each week as we share in this exciting new journey together.
Hello, Sunshines, and hello, Julie.
Well, good morning, Inga.
How the heck are you?
I'm good.
Good.
It's a sunshiny day. It
is
gorgeous out.
Very sunshiny. We'll take it.
Yes.
It's a good temperature too.
Yeah.
Sunshine and like that fall sweatshirt weather temperature. It's perfect. So today we're going to be talking about doctor visits.
Yes.
So I just wanted to ask you, how was your most recent doctor visit?
Well, speaking of doctor visits, I should probably call and get one because thankfully, knock on wood, I'm very, very healthy. And the only time I have to go is when I see my girly doctor.
Oof.
And I put that off as many years as possible. So I am the world's worst to ask.
Oh, yeah.
So that is, I'm really doing okay in terms of that.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. That's good to know. I'll remind you to get that scheduled.
Oh, I'll hurry and do her.
I'm sure you will get right on that. I usually go to the urgent care here in our town, Med North. It is fantastic, and they take really, really good care of me. My most recent actually was asking for some help after COVID because I actually had it and survived. I was a little fatigued, but got into the doctor there, and they were able to give me some steroids and some antibiotics and got me right back on track. So
good. Yeah, it was a little haul for you for a while and you were getting cranky. So I'm just glad you
perhaps maybe you suggested that I go to the doctor
a week prior to you finally getting your butt in there, but who's counting?
Right. Of course. Oh goodness. Well, our verse of the week was submitted by Sammy.
Yeah.
And it is actually Psalms 55:22. This verse says, "Give your burdens to the Lord, and he will take care of you. He will not permit the godly to slip and fall." I think this really, really, really plays in and hits home for me recently because as we're talking about COVID, Grandma Fisher actually did end up getting COVID. And she said she was really mad about it because she did everything right. She stayed home for a year and a half. She wore her mask. She got her vaccination, and she still got it.
Oh.
But I talked to God a lot when that was going on, and he took very good care of her. And thankfully, with the help of her doctors and then my mom, who is the 24/7 caregiver, and then a little bit of advocating on from me, we were able to keep her home, keep her well taken care of. I do have an aunt that's a nurse. She actually lives in Missoula, and she was really good about consulting with my mom and grandma as things were going on and making recommendations about what we could do at home to try to keep grandma going. So I gave it to God and he took really good care of her and she's on the mend.
Oh, yay.
Yep.
That is the best news ever.
Yes. And we'll get into, as we start talking about going to the doctor and those doctor visits, some of the things that we went through with grandma's situation. And then, we have some different stories of people that we've helped along the way and ways that you can advocate and things to be sure that you're paying attention to when you do go into the doctor visit.
Right.
What do you have for a happy story?
Well, I have a happy birthday story.
Oh.
Yeah. So the oldest U.S. veteran of World War II celebrated his 112th birthday.
I almost got that story. We must be looking at the same Good News Story website.
Well, I'll tell you what. We better start
We need to
checking each
consult.
other's notes.
Okay, well, that's not what mine is, but I did look at that one.
Good. So Lawrence Brooks of Louisiana had a drive-by party. And the governor tweeted him saying, "Mr. Brooks, the entire state of Louisiana thanks you for your service and we all wish you a joyous birthday." And his advice to all is serve God and be nice to others.
Oh,
Yeah.
It's really just as simple as that, isn't it?
It really boils down to all of the silliness that goes in our lives. It's really not necessary. Just be kind to each other and love one another.
You know, it's interesting that that is what you came up with, because I'm actually pulling a Julie today, and sorry, I got to itch my nose for a second here. Sorry. I actually stumbled across this picture, and it says be kinder. So let me go ahead and read this to you. Be kinder than them. Never let the actions and words of others define your happiness or virtue. Sometimes people are selfish, spiteful, unkind, and even cruel. Sometimes people speak words that cut deeper than any knife. We cannot let this be the rule we live by. We are called to be better, show more compassion than they have shown to you, smile more, give more, find a way to serve those who hurt you. Show them that what true love is. Make them wonder why you are still kind. Confuse them with your smile. Show them that you are not contained by their standards. Rise above, be superior in action and word. Forgive. Always be kinder than them.
Oh, wow.
So that ties in really well with Lawrence.
Yes. Yeah, that's great.
Yes. Well, if you guys have a verse that you want to send to us, or even a happy story that you come across, since Julie and I clearly need some help with that, since we keep picking the same story, please submit it to the caregivenpodcast@gmail.com and tell us why the verse is meaningful to you. If you don't feel comfortable doing that, that's okay. Still send us the verse. And again, if you have any uplifting stories or things that you would like for us to share, please submit those to the caregivenpodcast@gmail.com.
Very good.
Yeah.
Yeah, great.
So you kind of came up with this episode, and I think it's something that we see on a regular basis a lot with our clients, but also with our own family members. So what we're going to talk about today is essentially how to be prepared for going to the doctor.
Right. And way back when we talked about expectations, but especially with the staff issues that is just nationwide, and the pandemic and everything that's going on, it seems that just even getting into the doctor is a huge process.
Yes.
We've got people that can't see somebody for 3 months.
Yes.
You go to the doctor. I think they are saying the average wait is between 21 to 30 minutes to even just get into the room. Mm-hmm. And then after that, you're with your primary physician. Hopefully it's your primary physician that knows
Yes.
you for just a very, very short time. So what we want to do is kind of help you think about things before you get there, so that you'll be prepared to utilize your doctor's time as best as possible. Mm-hmm. They do say that with the populations of seniors and people over 65 in the United States is nearing 48 million last year. And of course, it's growing. Mm-hmm. And so basically what we're finding is that caregivers or our kids are taking their parents to the doctor, and they're saying that almost 70% of seniors have 2 or more chronic diseases. As a result, they are seeing an average of 4 different specialists a year.
Wow.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that's not the day-to-day, other pains and all that. That's just to keep their kidneys going or their heart. There's so much for us to consider as we get older.
Absolutely. So when someone starts thinking about taking a loved one to the doctor, what are the things that they should look at first? Maybe get out a piece of paper and start making a list. What are some important things to talk to that doctor about when you do get into that appointment?
Right. So what I would recommend, if you're watching this podcast or listening to this podcast, get out a piece of paper and list all of the different things that we bring up, and they'll be throughout this whole podcast. But right now, what we want to talk about is medications.
Yep.
That's a real big deal. I have an example of a pretty tragic situation, but this gal was taking her mother to the doctor, and about a year before she died, she said, "My mother suddenly seemed to lose her mental capacity. In the matter of 2 days, she went from being a frail but clear-minded 83-year-old to acting as though she had advanced dementia. She stopped wanting to eat, stopped communicating, and slept most of the day. After an
Agonizing.
period of trying to figure out what was wrong, it turned out to be a drug-drug interaction.
Oh.
She was 83 and weighed only 104 pounds, yet she had been on 12 drugs, and a doctor added an unlucky 13.
Oh.
It said, we slowly eliminated most of the drugs and got her down to 5 essential medicines. She slowly regained her cognitive capacities, but there were 2 months during which she had no memory. My mother's story is not unique. I have since read and heard others like it. It should be a cautionary tale for everyone with a very long medication list. So when you're talking about medications, I would say that you always have that current medication list with you, and make sure that anything that is added does not have any kind of a conflict with it. Right. And then I would also make sure that when you go to pick up the medicines, that you also go over that with your pharmacist. Have a couple sets of eyes look at that.
Right. Well, it's really important to know, what is the drug or the medication that you're taking? Why are you taking it? How might it interact with other medications? And then I think it's important to, if you're adding something new, to really be cognizant of the potential side effects.
Yep.
And maybe even keep a journal of that, or somehow keep track of how it's working for you. I mean, ideally, it works in a good way and makes you feel better.
Yeah.
But if it doesn't, it's really important to know what it's actually doing to you in terms of how it's making you feel. Is it clouding your memory? Is it, having a cognitive effect on you? But really keeping track of that and not taking for granted that everything is just okay, but paying attention to what you're taking.
Well, we have a client right now, and I think she's a client right now just because the kids don't feel comfortable with her being all alone at night, because that is when they're finding that she's falling. What had happened is they found out that she may accidentally be taking 2 of the medication instead of 1.
Right.
And so it made her extra groggy. So when she went up to go toilet during the middle of the night, she was a danger to herself.
Right.
So we were hired to stay with her until we could get her back to her baseline.
Right.
And thankfully we were able to help her with that. But here's another example of side effects. My husband was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease at the age of 55. Early on, we consulted a physician who recommended that he try a particular medication. I noticed that the doctor did not mention side effects. I asked about the medication side effects, and the doctor responded that most patients tolerate it beautifully. Nonetheless, I asked, what about those who don't tolerate it well? The doctor acknowledged that 1 in 5 patients find that it dulls their mind. This was an unacceptable side effect for us. Her husband was a computer science professor and enjoyed his career, so we could not take a 20% chance that his mind would be dulled. But if they would have never known that if they hadn't asked.
Right. Yes.
So,
Ask questions, and make sure that you understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll tell you another side effect deal. And this is not, and we're not just simply talking about elders, unfortunately, in this situation. There is lots and lots of youngsters that are on medications. I remember one time a family that I knew, their son was having acne problems. And so they were going to put him on this acne medicine, but one of the side effects was really some mental stuff. And they said, absolutely not.
Right.
We are not going to have this problem, but then cause this.
Solve a problem and create
and make a different problem and possibly a bigger problem.
Sure.
So they did go down different avenues to find different help for this young man and his skin conditions. But if you're trying to fix your acne and it's going to cause you to possibly be suicidal or something, that is absolutely unacceptable.
Right.
But you have to be an advocate. You have to ask yourself. I think the big word today will be advocate.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
And again, I mean, we're not discounting or discrediting medications. We're just saying make really, really certain that you understand what it's supposed to be doing for you or your family member, and that it is indeed working the way that it is supposed to, and not causing unintended consequences or side effects.
Right.
So.
Right.
And it's important to, I mean, for a lot of people, it's important to try to find anyway, if maybe there's a less aggressive type alternative.
Right.
Not every situation has that, but if there is something that you can do in place of, it's worth considering.
Oh, my daughter, when she was in junior high, she had stomach issues, and it really was scary. We couldn't get any local doctor because she was a peds because she was under
right.
18
Yeah.
years old. They wouldn't touch her here locally. And but they said, well, try this and try this. And, basically her stomach's shut down. Every time she tried to put in something into her mouth, it would vomit. It was just terrible. She was in the hospital for 5 days. They never did figure out anything.
Wow.
So anyway, then ended up taking her to Spokane, where there was a bigger place for the pediatrics. And then they did find something that was simply more logical about what was happening. But then to come back here, we looked into different alternatives, and it was really hard for me to get past the normal modes of doctors. I had never ever considered that maybe a chiropractor might be able to work on some nerves that go down into the stomach. How about any kinds of the alternative therapies, acupuncture? And very, very interesting. Learned a lot, but I felt like we absolutely had not a lot of support locally. So we were willing to go outside to figure out what was going on.
Right.
If you don't like the answer to something, don't stop there.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I think something to take into consideration, if your doctor offers you a couple different options of how you might be able to treat something, maybe the question to ask back to your doctor is, well, what would you do if it was your family?
Oh, yeah.
And maybe that helps you make that determination.
Yep. And that's for every disease.
Yeah, absolutely.
What if this was your mama?
Yep.
What if this was your kid?
Yep.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I love that advice a lot.
So some of the stressful things that I think come along with those doctor's appointments, like we were talking about, is, well, it can be stressful with the unknown. It can be stressful going in and sitting in a waiting room for, oftentimes way longer than we really should be sitting in a waiting room. And it just is what it is. But preparing to go to those appointments and having a good list of what you want to ask the doctor and knowing what you're trying to accomplish before you get there really should help you try to minimize some of that stress. So if you can do that before heading in, that is really a good thing to do. We also kind of have a checklist on what things that you can ask your doctor during a checkup. Which, do you have that with you, Julie?
I do. So if they're going to order any medical tests, let's talk about those.
Yeah.
There's going to be an X-ray. There's going to be a CAT scan, MRI, blood test. You really need to say, well, what is this for? And what will it show? And if they can answer it, I don't know that they can. You might have to go to a different department, but ask them, what is this going to cost?
Right.
Because then becomes the financial concerns. And we're not going to even go there because that's another, long talk. But ask what kinds of things you need to do to prepare. Sometimes you have to be fasting. Sometimes you can't take certain medications. Make sure you know the steps prior to any test. Yep. And once you're comfortable that you know that you want to have that test done. Why is the test being done? What steps does the test involve? How should I get ready? Are there any dangers or side effects? How will I find out the results, and how long will it take to get those results? And then after we get the results, what does that mean?
Right. What does it tell us?
Are we going to meet again and then make a plan for the future on how to get better? Yeah. Once you get your diagnosis, it just will tell you, it will identify the disease and what's going on. And so at that point, then you roll into, then how can we fix it?
Sure. And I think things that you can talk to your doctor about with their diagnosis is, is there a cause? What may have caused this condition? Is it going to be a permanent situation? How do we treat this condition or this diagnosis? How do we manage it? Will there be long-term effects on my life? And where can I go to learn more about it?
Yeah. Yep. That's really great. So the one thing that you want to think about is I've done this before too, is like all of a sudden this doctor comes in and they're so important. They're so smart and they look so professional.
Very busy and very important.
Very busy and very important. And you kind of just shut
blank.
down.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And you're like, oh my gosh, I am so glad they're here to see me, but I know that they just have a few seconds because they've got so many other, they're so busy. My stuff isn't that important. Yes, it is. You have got to stop. You have got to ask every question. The other thing is, I did work for some doctors prior to getting into home care. And when you're in any field, and it doesn't mean if it's just in medicine or what, you get used to a set of terminology. That is the way you talk. That is your whole life. So when a lay person comes in, they have no idea
Right.
what you're saying to them. And some of those medical words are this long.
Right.
And so you've got to be able to say, now stop and explain that to me again.
I don't understand. What does that mean?
I don't understand. I need to, let me repeat this back to you. And that's actually the best way is say, let me make sure I understand. So I'm going to explain it to you and you tell me that I've got it under control. And so that is a big deal. And if it's going to take a couple more minutes, that's okay, because you need to leave that place feeling comfortable that you know what the next steps are.
Yeah, there is nothing worse than going to the doctor and leaving and not feeling like you accomplished anything or that you understand. Another thing that you and I had talked about, Julie, sometimes when we take family members to the doctor, maybe the things that we've been saying, they aren't listening to as much or taking as seriously.
Right.
But then if the doctor says them, they will take them much more seriously. So it is important, like Julie was saying, to repeat back to the doctor, clarify, make sure you understand. And if you are taking a family member there, make sure that they understand that, we're all in agreement. This is what needs to be done. It's a little bit harder to resist what your doctor is telling you than it is to maybe resist what your daughter or your son or...
Well, and we've actually had to advise family members to call the doctor prior to the meeting because they knew that dad or whoever wasn't going to tell them the whole story or wasn't going to tell them that, boy, this is agonizing. It's keeping me up at night. I'm not sleeping.
Right.
But what we're finding is the generation of people that most of the people that need home care, they really respect their physicians.
Yes.
And so we will also say, call them ahead of time and let them know that they, it's one of the hot topics is, when is it time to take away the keys to drive? They're not going to listen to the kids. They are going to fuss and fight, and it's going to get really bad at times if they just don't want to give those keys away. But if you can say the doctor said, right now, no driving.
Validates it. Yeah. It switches it. It takes the pressure off the family.
Yes.
And there have been a lot of times that even with clients here who maybe don't have any family members locally, if we are able to have a discussion with the doctor's office ahead of time, so that they're aware of, hey, these are the things that we're facing and this is what we're trying to accomplish. Be aware of that when we get to the appointment, because you may not get the whole story from the client and it actually ends up working out really, really well in the end, and the client gets what they need and they get the direction from the person they're willing to listen to, and all's well that ends well.
Yeah. Another sneaky trick is when somebody will go to the doctor and not allow their spouse to go in with them. And then they do not give the spouse all of the information.
Right.
I think for a while there, my dad did that to my mom.
Oh.
And he was being very, very naughty. And so she would say, well, what did he say about this? Oh, everything's fine. Everything's fine. Oh, I've got this pill. It's going to be okay. And that was the end of the conversation. And mother was not comfortable with that. And finally she said, no more. I am going to every appointment with you. I will be there with you. But she had had enough.
Right.
Because some of dad's stuff was getting more and more complex.
Sure.
She also does that with my grandma. One of the sisters has to go with grandma at this point just to make sure that grandma's telling us the whole truth, that nothing but the truth. Is that how that works? And that is very common. Either the family, we've heard stories where somebody went to the doctor and they got a terrible diagnosis, but they didn't want to upset the family. They didn't want to worry the family. And so they carried that on their own and then tell them like a month before, oh, by the way, I've had cancer for 3 years and I'm now this is going on. It's just, there's horrendous stories out there. So hopefully you can figure out good communication prior and whatever works for your family.
Right.
We all got stories. We all got weirdness. How's it going to work for you?
Some of us more than others.
Oh boy. Oh boy. Yeah, for sure. Some of the other things to think about besides traditional medications is asking is my parent getting the right nutrition, and for them to weigh them every time, or to see the sparkle in their eye, or keep hydrated. Keep hydrated is very, very important. Supplements is a big deal, because a lot of people take a lot of vitamins, and there are contraindications for medications like grapefruit juice, or grapefruit in general are really bad for some medications.
Right.
And they won't let those medications work because of the acid and such. Right. So you've got to know what you can and cannot take. On the medications, do you take them on an empty stomach? Do you take it with a full stomach? Because if you take it on an empty stomach, are you going to get a tummy ache? There's just those kind of things. Also, does this medication or any of that falling, with my family, is it's going to make them unsteady? Right. That's a big problem. And the other great question to say, what do we need to work on before we come to our next visit? Right. I really love that question, because it's like, okay, you know what? The goal should be that maybe you lose 5 pounds. Right. Or
maybe the goal is just that you take your medication as it's prescribed and stay on top of that. Yes. And how many times do we run up against the situation where the medicine's working? Oh, yeah. So somebody then wants to stop taking it. Yes. And they forget that the reason they're feeling better is because they are taking the medicine and it's working. Yeah. So that's something to consider and pay attention to also.
And the other thing that we find a lot is how people, if they don't take it routinely and close enough to that normal time, it really, really will mess with them.
Yep. Get on a schedule, stay on a schedule. Excuse me. Do what the doctor orders, listen to your children. All of these things. We listen to all of you for all of our lives. It's your turn to listen to us.
Oh my goodness, that brings up a funny one. I had a daughter one time that she was just fit to be tied because mother was being such just a turkey. Yeah. She was being so naughty, and she did not want home care, but the daughter had to go work, and she just wanted us to check on her at lunch, make sure she was eating, make sure she was safe. And half the time we would show up, she wouldn't be there because she knew we were coming.
Sure. She was
but
hiding.
She would take the car and she would go down to the restaurant. And I tried to make her feel bad about it one time, because I said, part of the reason that we're here is really for your daughter, because she's got to go to work and she worries about you. And she said, I worried about her whole life. It's her turn to take care of me and worry about me. Oh, and she wasn't having it. And that daughter was just finally had to get to the point of accepting to say, mom's not ready for this, and we'll just have to take a day at a time.
Yep.
Oh, I can remember.
So true.
She was just so naughty. Oh, goodness.
Oh, goodness. So I'm trying to think what else. There are some other things that we wanted to talk about and that are different than your traditional doctor visits. So I don't know how much it happens in different areas, but I know that there are areas where some doctors will do house calls. Yeah. I think, isn't there something here that's kind of like a concierge service?
Concierge, the word.
Here in this valley. Yeah. Where people get connected with this particular doctor, and then they come.
Yeah, he makes the home calls and checks on them. And I think that basically they're available 24/7 to a select group of patients.
Sure, if you're part of that.
And
service.
what a cool program. Yeah, and I think it's actually becoming more of a thing. I mean, it used to be that doctors would go do house calls all the time. Sure. And then we got completely opposite away from that. Right. And now I think that they're trying to get it going again. Sure. I'm sure it's a big legal thing that you have to worry about.
And just, I think it's just a matter of time and availability, and we just don't have enough, for all of the people that need help, because I know there are physicians in this valley that are not taking new patients because they're just, overdone with what they currently have and trying to keep up with that. Telehealth has also become a thing for a lot of people. And I think in certain instances, it's a great thing.
Yeah.
I can tell you that, with my grandma having COVID, and it was a little rough in the beginning trying to get organized and get connected with her doctor's office. And it turns out that the doctor had given a message that was supposed to get to grandma, and somewhere along the way it just didn't make it to my grandma. But by the time a couple days had gone by, I went ahead and just started calling and advocating. And I tell you, once we got connected with the doctor every single day from there on out, and up to currently, he is still calling either her doctor, primary doctor, or his nurse. They are still calling my grandma every day to just check in and see how she's doing. And that's pretty special.
Yeah.
That would be Dr. Jennings. And I guess he is just phenomenal. So shout out to Dr. Jennings.
Yeah.
Grandma Fisher loves him.
Oh.
And I think he kind of likes her too, because she's sassy and she tells really good jokes and she's funny. And my mom does get to go in on the doctor's appointments with her, just, because she can be an audience for the good jokes.
Right. Right. No, that's good. That advocation is a big deal.
Yeah.
And you guys, I think that's the biggest thing that we just want to pull together today is say, when you go to the doctor, just be ready that it could take longer than you think it should. If they're doing everything that they can to see everybody, and just take good notes, understand the medications, the processes, the procedures, ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask those questions.
Right.
You have to.
And like you said, Julie, people, they get nervous and they don't want to take up too much of the doctor's time, but you know what? This is your time.
Yeah.
You are worth it. You need to ask the questions. So write those out before you head in so that you don't get just frazzled, I guess, when the doctor shows up and forget what you wanted to ask. And
don't assume you're going to remember.
Yes, write it down. If you can,
got to take
notes. It's so important to do that. Because I personally walk out of the doctor and have already forgotten 50% of what they told me just stepping out the door.
Yeah. Make them talk in layman's terms. Yep. Repeat back to them what they've told you so that you know, because I'm quite sure if I was to ever go to a doctor's appointment with my mother, I would then have to explain it to both my brothers and my sister.
Right.
And they would ask questions that I probably didn't think about, but I would have all of the notes and I could refer to that.
Yep. Because it can be frustrating too when you're trying to remember and then repeat to the next family member. Yeah. But if you just have a good little notebook and keep track of everything, that works out really, really well.
Yes.
All right, Julie. So on to the grandma sayings. You told me that we're not going to say what grandma says, but what the grandkids say about grandma. So
yes. Actually, I my daughter Callie, she said about her grandma is, "I love my grandma with all my heart. Nothing will ever change that."
Oh,
so
that's awesome. Having a great relationship with grandparents is so special.
Oh, it's really important. Mm-hmm. It really helps form you for sure.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Coolio. Well, we would love to have your grandma or grandpa sayings and your verses, any happy things that you want us to share. Please submit those to the Caregiven Podcast at gmail.com, and be sure to subscribe to this lovely podcast. You can do that on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts. You can watch us on YouTube. Also, you can leave a review for us. Please share us with your friends. Join our Apaga Care and Share Facebook group and just share in the discussion.
And remember, Inga only likes the positive things.
Yes, in case you weren't aware. All right, peace out, Girl Scouts.
Oh, have a good day.